5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And you know I had to tell him. Yeah. The earth is flat. Bro, you need to check your facts. I got high up through the roof. And I landed on the moon. The moon flat too. In reality, everything is just in 2D. Like a video game from 1983. I'm side scrolling up and down the street while y'all sleep. Call me B.O.B. cause I don't see the curve. Messing up my vibe, yeah, you got a lot of nerve. Read a book, nah, I don't wanna learn. Read a book, nah, I don't wanna learn. They say that we archaic. For me and my homies, we don't say it, we just spray it. I'ma leave it, I'ma stay it. Do your research, how much I gotta say it. Earth is flat. Bro, you need to check your facts. I got high up through the roof. And I landed on the moon. The moon flat too. In reality, everything is just in 2D. Like a video game from 1983. I'm side scrolling up and down the street while y'all sleep. Y'all sleep. Y'all sleep.
How you doing? I'm Mikey J, and you're watching Season 3 of KGUP Presents. Thank you for your patronage, and if you like this show and you want to support it, please get a t-shirt. And it's just like this one right here. I love this shirt. It's amazing. And it's only $13, so it's not going to break your bank. We also have hats and sling bags. Just go to www.kgup1065.com/shop. So I'm pretty excited for today's show. In fact, I was pleasantly surprised she got back to me so quickly. I mean, if you go to her YouTube page, she's got dozens of videos, and some of them have an upwards of 50,000 views, and she roughly has about 32,000 subscribers. So she's been gaining quite a following over the last couple of years. And, you know, during the last few months, I've watched probably 100 hours worth of her stuff. And I still watch, I haven't gotten through all of it yet. A lot of the videos I had to watch numerous times just to understand it, because it's so much information. But if you've done any research outside of flat Earth, you probably heard of Michelle Gibson, and you've probably discovered our history has been completely hijacked. And if they can hide the shape of the Earth, they are certainly capable of lying about our entire history, in which they have. I've watched a lot of videos on mud floods and other various topics that are related, and she is by far one of the greatest mud flood researchers. She's done a lot of research on the World Fairs, Tartaria, the orphan train, sacred geometry, underground cities, the Moors paradigm, the circular alignments, star forts, Zionism, the Great Reset of the 1800s. The list goes on. Michelle Gibson is probably the most versed in this area, and she would have a PhD in this field if it existed. So without further ado, let's bring her on, Miss Michelle Gibson. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Mikey, and thank you for finding me, and thank you for reaching out to me.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I haven't been doing this, relatively speaking, very long. I started blogging and making videos back in 2018 in June, so I've been at it just a little over 3 years. And
wow.
Prior to that, this was not in my experience, and I realized when I started to get the information that I needed to get it out however I could. So writing's completely in my comfort zone. I just make my videos from my blog posts. And the interviews have been new territory for me, but I've been getting more experience all the time. So I'm a lot more comfortable with it. And I realize saying no is not an option. People need to know about this so they can really wake up and make different choices about how to respond to each other, based on the fact that we've all been lied to and manipulated. And based on those lies, people die, and cities are destroyed and countries are destroyed, and the only ones that are benefiting from that situation are the ones that are creating it in the first place.
Right. And this whole topic is it's way deeper and bigger than I ever expected. I mean, just watching like your research and the videos, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so much. I can't even like comprehend some of the information that I just had to watch, some videos like 2-3 times just to get a grasp of like how big this really is. And it's huge.
And I didn't start out where I arrived. And I'll go into that if that's okay. This is probably as good a time as any
Sure.
to talk a little bit about myself. I just turned 58 on Monday, and I was born in the Washington, D.C. area, outside of Washington, D.C. And so I think I started picking up stuff about out of place things in the environment when I was young. But I didn't start putting it together until I started doing my own research, what I'm going to talk about in just a moment. But I grew up in Montgomery County, Maryland, graduated from high school there in 81, spent a year in junior college, and then I joined the Army to get money for college. And it also allowed me to travel and, basically change my life at that time. And I really don't think that had I not joined the Army, I probably would never have broken away from the family and programming and things like that. I might have, but I did it in a very dramatic way. And I never looked back, essentially.
Right.
I've lived a very different life, lived in a lot of different places. And it's kind of what opened me up to the stream of information that started coming in. And I've been interested in alternative history, like in search of, back in the 70s, 80s, there were TV shows called Unsolved Mysteries and In Search of, and Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World. And I love stuff like that. And
same here.
So I would watch all of that kind of stuff. And I was interested particularly in ancient history. I'm glad I didn't major in history, because it's doubtful I would have been open to receive this. Instead, I've just lived a different life and educated myself on the things that were interesting to me. And with the internet, more and more became available with regards to alternative researchers and alternative media, where you could really start delving into, people doing their own research. And I think it's only been in the last few years that people like me, who have no prior experience with any of this, have actually been getting on YouTube and making videos and things like that. I know I'm not the only one. And it seems like there's more and more that are starting to record their own interest and experience. And with everybody coming together like this, it's just really created a community of awake people. And I know for myself, had I not started doing my own research and putting it on videos and getting it out there, I would never have heard of the mud flood.
Right.
And that's not where my research started. As a matter of fact, I'm an intuitive person, and so I think I just started asking the right questions, and I just feel like I got all this information in return because I was asking the questions. And I was living, when I really, really started to wake up to this civilization that I'm going to talk about, I was living in Oklahoma. I had a friend who is a Moorish American, and he brought the piece about the Moors into my life. But I had already taken a workshop on sacred geometry. I knew about that. I was already interested in megaliths and ancient history.
Mm-hmm.
I had already watched researchers that were dowsing and tracking earth energy lines, and I learned about their research. But my own original research started when I was traveling with friends of mine in Oklahoma, and one of my friends gave me a map of actually it's the world. It's a flat map. I'm just going to say I'm not driven by whether the Earth is a plane or a planet.
Mm-hmm.
I've come across information that supports the whole idea that our perception of space and time was tampered with. And I'm very open to it, but frankly, I care more that there are beings that want us dead.
Yeah.
whether the earth is flat or round. I'll just put that out there. Okay, we can debate that another time.
We
The
can
real
all agree. we can all agree that there's controllers and they don't like
Yes.
us very much and they want us dead.
Exactly. That's exactly what my point is. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
because, I'm open to the whole subject. I have questions both ways, and I tend to land on the side of sacred geometry. So if anything, I'm most comfortable saying the earth is a torus, which is a donut shape. But but the reality is there are very evil beings that have done all of this, and I'll talk about what this is in just a moment. And they don't like us.
Yeah.
They need us and they don't like us, and they have no regard for human life.
Right.
And we're kind of in the mess that we are right now worldwide because their plans got very advanced. And the good news is people are waking up, and I do believe that I do believe in a brighter future, and we just have to get through this, what we're in right now. So anyway, my research started when I connected the dots of cities of North America, and my map is tattered. But I found a star tetrahedron, also known as the Star of David, when I connected major cities and places in North America. And I started it in Edmonton as the top of here. That's Edmonton.
Mm-hmm.
And then I connected the major cities going down towards Ottawa. Ottawa's right here. I found these cities going down that way. And then I was able to connect it back up to Edmonton. And this is because I had an education in sacred geometry, so I knew what it was. And I thought, well, maybe I can find another one. And so by knowing the basic layout of the star tetrahedron, I was able to find a second one. And the bottom point is at Merida in Mexico.
Are there islands in the waters where the star kind of like extends?
Yeah,
oh, wow.
There are. And, it's interesting. I have a place up here. The alignment goes right through Isle Royale in, off the top of my head, I'm not sure which of the Great Lakes it's in. But that's where ancient copper mines are located. And I had read about the ancient copper mines in Isle Royale long before I found this. So that stuck out in my mind, and I actually made a little note about it here. And then I extended the lines out. I had been studying and other researchers and people enough to know that's what this civilization was very precise. And so once I started to plot cities and places that were in alignment, and some of them were in circles, big circles, and some of them were a long line around the world, I started writing them down on spreadsheets. And so my research started following these places in alignment. And I've got like 18 or 19 pages here. And that was where my research started. And like I said, I had a Moorish American friend that showed up in my life around 2013. Mm-hmm. And I knew him from a Unity Spiritual Life Center in Oklahoma City. And he was very quiet. I mean, he didn't tell me this stuff, but he was with me as I was learning about it. And he knew he was a Moor, but like so many other people, a lot of what we traveled and experienced together brought back information that he needed. And I needed him to understand about the Moors and how beautiful they are, and the higher consciousness, and bringing in Moorish teachers and so forth. And I was completely open to it because I knew something was really wrong. And when I say Moor, M-O-O-R, goes back to Lemuria. So the Washita Moors, M-U'-U-R-S, are still alive today. The Washita Empire was North America. It's matriarchal, ruled by an empress, and it's ruled by an empress to this day, even though the empire is not recognized anymore. And I was living in a part of the country that was the heart of the Washita Empire. So I was once I started to see things, I saw it everywhere. Earthworks, buildings, you name it. So it was just a gradual process, really, of waking up to what was there. And the more I started looking into different things, the more information came in.
Right. Yeah. Because whenever you watch like these old shows and programs, like Unsolved Mysteries and In Search of, and then, Ancient Aliens, they always talk about these ancient civilizations that were possibly built by aliens, or, Atlantis, and all these like, almost science fiction type of like realities. And they never, no one has ever really talked about the Moors. And I've always been curious because, I've heard like jokes inside of movies and like, Roman style movies. And, they'll kind of like bring up Moors as if everyone already knows who they are. And I never really had any reference to what people they were and how vast they were, vast of a civilization they were, because it's been like completely hidden.
Right. And the only ones that know are the ones at the top, probably top of secret societies like Freemasonry. The ones that have done this know exactly who the Moors are. And they're the ones that are the most targeted. And it's not at all what we've been taught, our history and our relationships with each other. It wasn't all about war and disease and fighting. It was actually a beautiful civilization that was integrated. Tartaria was part of it, but there were also other empires. And I have to believe they were completely integrated, because otherwise you wouldn't have the same things showing up everywhere. And that includes, electric streetcar systems that look the same, rail systems, subway systems. And the stories they give us for what we are told just don't add up. The dates don't add up. The technology that we were supposed to have in the late 1800s, early 1900s doesn't add up. I think if anything, they were digging it out and not actually building it. And I think the same goes for the building of places like North America, where there wasn't supposed to be anything. And so, instead of building it, the so-called immigrants, or whoever they were actually digging things out. And the controllers, the 1%, 13 families, whatever you want to call them, the ones that sucked up all the wealth of the world and took over everything, by building themselves into it. I mean, they were there at the ground level, so they could take over the railroads and take over manufacturing that probably didn't exist in the form that we know it today, but they turned it into a profit-making enterprise, and they started monetizing resources, fishing and lumber and, cutting down and selling. And it wasn't like that before.
Right.
I'm sure the ancients used resources, but they didn't overuse them, or they didn't just sell them to make a profit. They used them in some way that was respectful.
Yeah. If you've done any type of traveling, worldwide or even local in the North America, I mean, you can see these monolithic structures. And I had always, looked at them in awe and like, how did they build these in the 1800s or early 1800s or 1700s? There's no way. We didn't even have the technology to move that type of structure from one place to the next. And we're expected to believe that, the horse and buggy, we're able to drag these massive stones just by whipping people.
Even if you look at the narrative just a little bit and compare it with what's actually there, it falls apart.
Yeah.
And they count on us not being awake enough to ask the questions or to think critically. And critical thinking was removed from the educational curriculum back in the 1850s, which is when I think the reset actually got underway. I think it started in earnest around 1830. I think by 1850, 1851, they had the Crystal Palace exhibition in London, and they kicked it off. They kicked off the New World Order timeline. They said, look at what we've done with all the technology that was there, and they were showcasing the original technology. And then either they destroyed it or they hid it away or they used it in secret. And I think the history of the World's Fairs since that time up for the next 100 years was that process. They were using these World Fairs as some kind of programming device,
Definitely.
for one. And then they were also saying, oh, well, we built these on a temporary basis, and that's why we destroyed everything just about afterwards. And so you might have a few of the buildings still standing, like Chicago has a museum, actually 2 buildings that I know of that were supposed to have been part of the World's Fair. But if you look at pictures of the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, it's just like this beautiful ancient
massive.
Greco-looking architecture that's no longer there. And, so that's one thing. They took credit for it, like all the architecture and all the canals and all the railroads and, you name it. So they took it out of they didn't teach us about it. They took critical thinking out of the curriculum, and then they brought in alcohol. Distilleries and breweries started showing up in mass around the 1830s, starting around the 1830s and then onward. Other drugs, today it's opiates, but the opiates have been around for a while.
Wow.
So flooding the market with drugs, creating these addictions, so that people wouldn't wake up to what's actually real.
So they were distracted.
They're distracted.
Yeah.
Taught to, program to spend money, so consumerism becomes the big driver. And then you have things like video games where you just keep plunking quarters in like you do with slot machines, over and over again, and, tapping into those addictive tendencies that we're prone to under the right circumstances.
So they had a knack for mind control even way back then, because it didn't start with Edward Bernays. It started way before that, and he just kind of like perfected it for the current era.
Yeah, I think there were certain people that were held up. Freud was in there. Bernays was a relative of his, I believe.
Wow.
And others as well. And they were part of this, you could call it deep state or, whatever was behind this very organized, very deliberate dumbing down of the masses so we would be easily controllable, because they know who we are and we don't know who we are.
So after
that was done deliberately.
Sorry about so after these mud floods, this is when all the control, the mind control and the reprogramming came along. So how do you think this cataclysmic event happened in the first place? I mean, obviously, there was I think you put up a video where there was like all these like television shows, and you kind of put it all together. And obviously there was an underground civilization underneath the major cities. And
there's a ton of underground infrastructure all over the earth. So it's very viable that both survivors of the original civilization and the controllers had a place to live until the surface became livable again.
Mm-hmm.
And my belief is that they dug up enough of the infrastructure out of the mud flow to get civilization restarted. And then, our history since then has been clearing things out and electrifying. And, when streetcars were first started running in the 1850s or so, 1860s, they were pulled by mules and horses. Then they're electrified for about 30 or 40 years. And then all of a sudden they're gone because there's cars and buses to replace them. And I think that was planned. I think they used them until they had a replacement. And then who makes money from cars and gasoline? The controllers, Standard Oil and, all those guys. So,
sorry.
So they just replaced it with something that they could control.
Yeah.
then got rid of it. And there's just a few places that have functioning streetcars, and it used to be all over.
Yeah.
I found a history of a streetcar in Manaus, Brazil, which is in the heart of the Amazon rainforest. And the story about how they say it got there just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Europeans did it when they got here for the rubber industry. It's like, yeah, right.
Yeah, and in those videos, I mean, there's one particular scene in that video. I'll have to put it in the description, but they were saying how the city intentionally decided to bury the entire city, 10 to 15 feet deep, and everybody had to agree to it. And it was like, and then they tried to say that everyone had to build below the ground, but it didn't really, none of it makes sense. Why would you build something intentionally to fall apart? Because when they were going underground in these first floors, it was all rubble. It looked like as if there was a cataclysmic mud flood event and it buried everything on that first floor. So there was no way that was planned. And no one would build something that kind of structure to be in complete rubble, where they would have to build, use the second floor as the first floor. None of it makes any coherent sense.
Yeah, but it's the only story they have, so they tell it over and over again to explain. Say this, like cities like Seattle were raised up.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
And people lived in these really weird ways over the next couple of years on how they got around the town while it was being done. And, it really doesn't add up. And how I think it happened, I mean, there's a lot more mud flood researchers than researchers doing exactly the same kind of research I'm doing, but I'm open to a number of different possibilities. But what I would stand firm on is that it was deliberate, that they used some kind of technology or some kind of black magic or something to create this cataclysm. Could have been underground, direct energy weapons. It could have been, herd mining type related things. I just don't think it was a random event.
Right.
I don't think there would have been any way to have this level of organization in terms of bringing us back to some kind of civilization if it had been like an extinction level event from, space, weather, or whatever. I think it was definitely deliberately planned. I think these negative beings were trying to take advantage of a situation where I think human beings have a lot more connection to source and spirit than what we've been taught, and that we're very powerful. And so they don't want us to know that. And especially together, we're very powerful, individually and as a collective. And so they removed our understanding of our connection to source as well as the rest of the universe. So to get back to what you were saying about ancient aliens, is I believe ancient humans built the infrastructure, but that there was a relationship with other galactic communities, that we weren't living in a bubble or quarantine or in a vacuum. I think we were highly advanced and there was a relationship. Because you hear about stargates,
yeah,
you hear about time travel. There's so many different aspects to the knowledge that we had at one time that, again, I think we were very advanced. And I'm grateful for shows like Ancient Aliens, because if the show was called Ancient Humans, it would have been off the air a long time ago.
Yeah.
But they can get away with it because it's Ancient Aliens. And it's okay for us to speculate about that. But we are talking about a very advanced civilization that goes back to ancient Lemuria. I think it was the same Atlantean civilization, and I think it existed up until relatively recently, which would have been whenever this event took place or series of events. And then they turned everything upside down, turned it into a whole slave narrative, especially where the Moors are concerned, but also the end result is all humanity.
Right.
But they had to create the narrative to create the division and the, all this stuff that's been going on that we learn about in school.
Right.
Social narrative and whatnot.
So I have my own theory of how the mudfloods happened, because you kind of brought all the cities together, because like all the star forts and all this sacred geometry, how all these cities are like connected in some way. And if they did that around the earth, they could have coordinated a single event that happened simultaneously. And there's a video, and I don't know if you've seen it. It's called the guy's name is War Enon. He's very anonymous. I mean, obviously the name Anon's in his name, but he talks a lot about a lot of the research that you've done. He talks about the free energy system and how the churches and cathedrals were really used to capture energy, and by extracting the electromagnetic energy from the ether, the sky. And this power was distributed to the cities, and it was completely free. And yeah, I definitely have to send you that video. It's a 5-hour video. And this is where my theory comes in. And I don't recall anyone mentioning this, so correct me if I'm wrong, but these buildings had these energy collectors or central energy reactors. So these cathedrals had magnetrons that had the ability to not only store energy, but they could emit frequencies. So these resonators had these engines that could overload a frequency that would liquefy the ground. And at the same time, no human being within that range could survive this high frequency, because if it can liquefy the ground, it's going to liquefy a human being within range. So I think, you would just turn into mush. So that's how I think that everyone was wiped out. And that's why they had all these like orphan trains, because they were sending out thousands of children all around the country and around the world. And they were being departed to places that were away from the major cities. And so the controllers that lived, I mean, they were out wherever they were. And so they were able to remain in power. And then they needed people to dig out these cities and make them inhabitable again. So they, indoctrinated these kids in these orphan asylums, and then brought them back once they were old enough to dig the cities out. And then they were completely brainwashed by that time.
I think that's all in there. They somehow they did it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also the idea of like baby nurseries.
The baby incubators.
Well, not just the incubators. I think that was part of it too, but even just raising human babies, because we're a lot smaller than we used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing they did, I think they was socially engineered, or humanly and socially engineered us, so that you would have Black people from Africa and white people from Europe and yellow people from Asia and red people from North America. And that's all bunk too, because this Moorish civilization was all over the earth. So they had to do something to the gene pool to create that homogeneity, division, or the homogeneity in the gene pool now in terms of skin color. And I think a lot of the genocides that took place over the last century or two were involved in that. Cambodia, and it's actually in a lot more places than what we're taught. I'm doing research on our modern history, and I'm finding a lot more examples. But it just was a different world. Mm-hmm. And melanin is actually a superconductor, and so
interesting.
If you look into it, and there's a superfood, and I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head. Hopefully I will by the end of the interview, that's pure melanin, and it's really good for you.
Huh.
And I can't think of it right now. But anyway, there's so much more to us And the controllers are super afraid of the Moors, and that's why one of the many reasons they're been so oppressed by this system, because the controllers know who the Moors are, and they know what their abilities are, and so they're doing everything they can to keep the level of consciousness at a low level, so they can keep controlling not only the Moors but the rest of the population as well.
Very interesting.
So, that's not just coming from nowhere. I mean, that's after a lot of study and just what I've come to know. I mean, the most conscious and psychic people that I know are Moors. So there's real ability in there, and the population has been targeted, but they're switching the narrative, and they're using the same playbook in a different way now, because again, this is really about control of all of humanity, and they just had to knock the higher consciousness out of the picture so they could lower the collective consciousness, which is where the whole, the racial division thing comes in.
That whole Ancestry.com thing, that's always made me nervous. Like, I want to do it because I want to know where my family comes from, but we don't know who really owns that and who monitors that and tests the blood. I mean, it could be our controllers, like, trying to disseminate who's who, and then they'll be able to wipe us out.
And that's, I won't do it for that reason. I don't think it's for our good, like so many other things. And I do believe it's up there in terms of who's involved in it is connected to the controllers, and human DNA is a hot commodity.
Right.
They want that DNA. I mean, that DNA is really special. And so your hesitation is founded. Again, it makes it they don't want us to figure this out, so we become conspiracy theorists and crazy and whatnot. But the bottom line is they've had it really good, and they want to keep it, and they don't want to be held accountable. And their only offense or defense is to cast shade on people that are just trying to clear things up and get to the truth. And a lot of good people, a lot of good researchers have been persecuted and worse, killed. Some of them killed.
Yeah.
For trying to get the truth out.
There is information that we're allowed to talk about, and then if we get too close to the truth and we start to spread our word out a little too clear, then that's when the censorship starts to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
So, it's just important for people to start asking questions. Just, don't accept everything that you're told blindly, especially if it comes from mainstream media. But it goes deeper than that. Mm-hmm. This is it is, like you said earlier, it's a very big topic, not just with this civilization, but with what's taken place. And so it covers a lot of people in our society, involved in crimes against humanity. And like I said, they don't want to stop, and they don't want to be held accountable for it.
Yeah.
Because I don't think they're human. So they get whatever they can from human beings that they don't have. And one is our soul, our energy, our innocence, our inherent kindness. And we have to be manipulated to hate and to kill and to do all the other terrible things that have been taking place. And again, I think drugs have a lot to do with it too. Get people hooked on drugs, and then they start doing bad things too.
Yeah, to want the level of power and control that they seek, you have to be a complete psychopath to want that kind of thing, and to never be satisfied. I mean, you have to be crazy, completely crazy.
And they're not satisfied.
No.
And that's going to be one of the things that is their undoing. I mean, there's only so many children you can kidnap or do whatever before people are going to start noticing. And that's the age that we're living in. I mean, they don't control the narrative anymore. So it's coming out every which way about a lot of the things that have been hidden from us.
Well, that's why social media has been the way it has, since like the middle of last year, and how everything has been so censored that people who do want to spread truth are being cut out. And it's to a point where we can't even say certain words without being banned and having a strike, and then your channel is being deleted altogether without any explanation. And it's forcing everybody to just, virtue signal to their own base on a network where everyone is like partially awake and is just interested in their own thing. But the people who are walking around like zombies, they don't get the information that they should be getting. And that's all by design. They want the sleepers to never wake up, Right. So like, that's why I'm staying on YouTube. Like I could go to other platforms and just, be safe and not, be subjected to being completely cut off. But I still want to try to wake people up and spread the truth as much as I can until I do get cut off,
And I'm kind of the same way. I mean, I've got other platforms too, but I'll keep putting information up on YouTube as long as I'm able to, which hopefully will be a while. I mean, I just don't see this going on forever. And I don't see it being ultimately successful, because one thing is I know the people that behind it are criminals. And I just don't think that this situation is going to be allowed to continue much longer. I think it's being used to wake people up right now.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of good people behind the scenes that are waiting for the right moment. And and that we'll start seeing some changes. So that's my belief. That's my hope. I can't allow myself to think otherwise. That would mean that they will get away with it, and I just can't go there, So maybe I'm a little rosy about it, but rosy kind of gets me through the day and keeps me going. Because if I didn't have a positive outlook, I would load my car up and I would probably find a nice, comfortable place in the desert with shade and hang out there. But, I don't see that need happening. And even a few years ago, I was seriously worried about it. And I'm at a different place about it, because people are waking up every day. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I just don't think that the ones behind the evil can keep it hidden anymore.
So let's kind of dive into your research a little, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Because a lot of your research has been so fascinating, like the Civil War. You talk about some of the forts and how they almost look like they weren't meant for any type of invasion, and that they were just put there as, what were they put there for?
I would think they were originally circuitry in the Earth's grid, and the Earth's grid was worldwide. You find starports all over the Earth. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, the parts of the starports are called batteries, and I think that's what they actually were. I think they were functioning in some capacity as part of the circuitry of the Earth's grid, and they were also connected to railroad a lot of times. They were in pairs or in clusters, which batteries are. It's a very sophisticated grid system, and part of what supplied the free energy was this system that received and transmitted and generated. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very real. The ancients knew what they were doing, and when I say the ancients, I mean ancient humans that lived well into the present day and are still alive. They're still with us. And so it's kind of a misnomer. I think ancient, you think a long time ago. It's like, oh no, the Washita Moors, very much alive today, and they're known as the ancient ones. And it's because their history goes back to Mu.
So the Civil War officially ended in 1865?
1865 was the official end of it. The official beginning of it was 1861.
Very interesting.
And if anything, I've come to believe that it didn't happen in the way that we've been told.
Right.
And that a lot of it was scripted and made up and had to do with the mud flood, as well as destroying infrastructure. So they had to, a lot of these star forts were said to have been built either right before the Civil War or during the Civil War, which would make them a target. And so a lot of them were shelled and bombarded during the war. And so I think the purpose was to destroy these batteries, these components. Some are allowed to remain. You know, there's some intact ones all over the world today, but a lot of them were attacked not only during the Civil War, but also World War I, World War II, other conflicts, the ones that we know about. But there's also tons of little conflicts all over the earth that was doing the same thing.
Yeah. You know, I do think that some of these battles did happen, but they were mostly as like population control.
Population control and infrastructure destruction. And again, we're just told a story about it, about what happened.
Yeah, because if you look at the first battle, you talked about the Battle of Fort
Sumter. Fort Sumter.
It is. Mm-hmm. And the location of it and how there was just one like bullet hole that started the whole thing, or one fire. The official story is so ridiculous how the battle started and how the war was triggered from that one event. And when you really look at it, you're like, how could this start a war? You know?
And actually that sounds a lot like the Vietnam War too. The Gulf of Tonkin was the same thing. And a lot of people question whether that ever happened. But that was the beginning of the Vietnam War.
Right. There was no casualties, just a single bullet hole.
So it's, again, it's just the last video that I did was the one on the Civil War, sanitary fairs and other Civil War anomalies.
Yes.
My YouTube channel is Michelle Gibson. And if you type in Moors, it'll come right up. I had my channel long before I started doing my own videos, so I didn't put any fancy name with it. But I seriously doubt a lot of the stuff that we're taught in history happened the way that we're told it was, and that there was more than likely something else going on. The same thing with the whole story about immigration. I think they went out west, the Irish immigrants and wherever they were from, the Chinese, they were out there digging out infrastructure. Same thing with canals, railroads and canals. They weren't building it.
Yeah. So you think the Mississippi River is a canal? Yeah.
The Mississippi River, if you draw a straight line from the Mississippi Delta to the Nile Delta, it's a straight line on the map. And I think they're a mirror image of each other, the Mississippi River and the Nile River. And
interesting.
They're both long rivers. They both have Great Lakes associated with them, because the end of the Mississippi River is near the Great Lakes and the end of the Nile River is near the Great Lakes of Africa. The deltas look very similar. But I think by saying that, I think our river systems are actually canal systems, and that the ancients built, they all have like a snaky S-shaped, but some of them do, the major rivers do. And then the canals are pretty much straight, but you have both. But if you look at different rivers and different canals all over the world, they look the same. So I think they were as comfortable on water as on land. And again, all of this infrastructure had some kind of purpose on the grid system.
Yeah.
All the buildings were precisely placed. They tended to be oriented north, south, east, west. They were perfectly lined up with each other, and that wasn't done randomly. And if you look at our history, all these settlers came in and they started platting and they started building all these places and they didn't exist before. And that story is repeated over and over again, especially in North America where there wasn't supposed to be anything. Now, other places didn't have that narrative associated with it. The Romans built things, or the Greeks, or whoever it happened to be, built all of these temples and all this stuff. But you have the same style of architecture in North America.
Yeah.
But they tell us it was built in the 1800s, 1900s. You have you have legislative buildings, government buildings, museums, schools that look like old world architecture in North America, and you have these dates of late 19th century, early 20th century, and we can't even build like that today.
No, we don't even attempt. We build things out of just cheap materials and steel beams.
And particle board.
Yeah.
I don't know how many buildings I watched go up in my local area that are just like plywood and particle board, with siding over it.
Yeah.
And they will tear these huge masonry buildings down in a heartbeat and tell us they aren't safe or structurally sound or need to bring in something new. And, that's what happens to a lot of the older architecture, is it just gets demolished.
Well, that's what was so fascinating about the World Fairs, especially the one in Chicago, where they built that giant structure, and we were meant to believe that was a temporary structure. Yet they had 300,000 people, all in that same, monolithic. I don't know, what do you call it? What do they call it? Yeah, stadium. And that was, if that was a temporary structure, wouldn't people be afraid that it would collapse underneath their feet, But they weren't temporary at all. I mean, they were intentionally destroyed after the event happened.
I believe that. And there's a lot of disinformation coming in now that has a lot of people questioning that, because there's photographs coming in showing the Chicago World's Fair being built. I think photoshopping happens all the time, especially with regards to this. So I look at the evidence of my own eyes. I look at what my common sense says about these pictures of these palatial buildings that we're told were built in a short period of time to be temporary, and I call BS. And that anything that's done to try to convince people that they were built when they said they were is deliberate misinformation to sow doubt and confusion among the people that are waking up to this, because it's probably some of the most compelling evidence out there about this original civilization. And it's gotten a lot of traction in the alternative community. And this new information has been picked up by some people in the alternative communities, and they're putting it out there saying, well, maybe they did build it when they say that they did. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm one researcher that will never say that.
No.
I think it's easier to Photoshop something than to build what they're telling us was built. And the same thing with all of these buildings. There's a plaque on it. There's a date carved onto it. Much easier to do that than actually build the buildings that they're telling us they built.
Yeah, because when those cities were dug up, that was the date of them finding it. And then they claimed that was the date that it was built. When really that was just the date that it was founded by those sets of people. But a lot of those structures were already there. Like I've been noticing that some of the videos that I've watched, and then I go to like archive.org, and some of those pictures have been deleted off their site. So history is being deleted in real time. So when someone discovers something, puts it in a video, and then they're like, oh, we need to take this down because it's linking to a past that they don't want us to discover. Like there's a bunch of photos in the San Francisco archives, and there's like a whole string of photos that are being deleted. I mean, you can see the numbers, and the sequence of numbers are being taken out. Because I was trying to like find some of the oldest photos there were of San Francisco, and they were just being taken out. Yeah.
And it's interesting because you can find photographs of San Francisco around the time that the gold rush was said to have taken place, 1849, 1850, 1851. And you'll see San Francisco covered in dirt, Portsmouth Square, and then the hills in the distance are covered in dirt. And then within a few decades, you see pictures of these grand buildings and so forth in San Francisco. So I think the gold rush was also a cover story for what was really going on.
So all those cowboys and they built all that.
Yeah. It's what they want you to think. And there was something else that came to mind. I hope I can bring it back. You said you're in Dallas, right?
Yes.
And you mentioned Rockwall.
Mm-hmm.
I was in Oklahoma City when I started waking up to this. And when my friends and I were traveling on our way to Rockwall, because I had read about it on one of these alternative history sites, and I'm like, I got to go there. We stopped by Dealey Plaza. And it's the first time I'm there. And I'm already not 100% sold on the official story. When I got there and I saw the book depository on one corner and the place where Oswald was imprisoned on this corner, and the castle where he was shot right next to it, all right there together, feeling claustrophobic, this is starting to raise major red flags. And then when I started looking into, I Googled JFK and Freemasonry. Mm-hmm. And that was when the truth popped up, and I realized that Freemasonry is not benevolent and benign at its core.
Right.
Not necessarily the organization as a whole, but at the upper levels, there's people that know what's going on, and that there's a negative force involved in that. And so that was an important part of my journey. So from there, we went to Rockwall, and nobody in Rockwall knew about the Rockwall. I was asking around. I was trying to find somebody who could tell me where to go. They're like,
it's
what?
A small town too.
I was like, what? But I got to be there. I got to feel it. And I don't know if you've heard of a researcher on YouTube named Josh Reeves.
No.
You might want to look up some of his videos, because he was one of the first people that I watched to learn about Rockwall. And this is before I started doing my own research, but you probably would enjoy his videos. So Josh Reeves, and check out his videos on Rockwall. Right. So for those who may not know what that is, Rockwall is right outside of Dallas, near Garland, and it's on the other side of Lake Worth. Is it Worth? No, that's not Worth. What's the lake that's there?
White Rock? No, not White Rock Lake. There's so many lakes.
Yeah, there's a lake outside of Rockwall, between Rockwall and Dallas. Mm-hmm. That is a man-made lake. So there's a lot of speculation as to what might have been there before it became a lake.
Interesting. And
I found out about it on a website of Dr. Sam Osmanagich, and he's the archaeologist scientist who basically discerned that about the Bosnian pyramids. I would say discover. Again, they're called mountains, but he's the one that figured out they were actually pyramids. And he's done some great research, Sam Osmanagich. So I learned about it from a website of his, that it was thousands of years old at this Rockwall place, and that there was an archaeologist in the early 19th century that had started digging there, and then for one reason or another stopped digging. And that when the city was first founded, there was this talk about this rock wall, and there were some masons that were there, and they were going to name it after the masons or whatever. And then they found this rock wall and said, well, let's name it Rockwall. So that was early in my awakening to this. I would say within 2 or 3 years before I started doing my own research. But it was definitely something that got my attention and curiosity. And, once you start tuning into it, this information is everywhere. I mean, you've got a flower mound near Dallas, Flower Mound.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
It's a mound. I mean, it's a mound. And these mounds are actually everywhere, but there's only a few places where it's actually called mound, or they're in parks. But mounds are everywhere. I want to say there's one of the universities is near that area. You see Denton Flower Mound, but there's a college in that area too. So it's just everywhere, and it's just a matter of really being able to tune into it. If you're open to it, you'll start seeing things in the environment, and then you won't ever see anything the same way again.
Well, it's just like the courthouse, and when I reached out to you, I sent a photo of the courthouse there, and on Google, the top of the building structure, which is like an onion dome, and it's blurred out. So I don't know why they would blur that out unless there were some kind of significance. I mean, why would you blur that out? I just don't get it. What are they hiding?
A lot of those buildings have had parts of them removed. So like you're talking about an onion dome. I've seen, before and after pictures of buildings like that. Mm-hmm. They'll take off a part of it. And again, I think it has something to do with the grid system, because it was all connected. It was very powerful.
Yeah.
So there's something about it they either don't want us to know about, or they don't want functioning.
And it does look as if it was dug out. That there's parts of the structure that's underground, but it's partially buried. So the windows are like, halfway sticking out, which, for as a contractor or builder, like, why would you? Who in the right mind would build that? It makes no logical sense.
An excellent example of that is, I believe it's the St. Mary Magdalene Church in Omaha, in Nebraska. And if you just look up mud flood Nebraska, it'll probably be what shows up. But it's a really good example of the before and after of a church that's dug out. And, you can see where the mud was before they dug out, and afterwards you can almost see the line, and you can see where the street kind of goes up and where the mud covered it. Yeah. So again, if anybody has any questions about that or wants to look it up, it's out there, but we're not taught about it. They don't want us to know about it. They don't want us asking questions. So most people, because of their programming and so forth, just don't, until you really tune into it, you don't see it. And for myself, until I tuned into it, and around, I want to say 2013, 2014 was when I started to notice. So that was most of my life. Yeah. I just turned 58. So like I was like 49 or 50 before I started noticing things that were in the environment that I hadn't noticed before. Yeah. And that was when I was living in Oklahoma City.
Wow.
And starting to wake up to all of this.
So you talk a lot about the circle alignments and sacred geometry. Are they related, or how are they different?
Let's see.
Because that's one of the few things that I have a hard time wrapping my brain around. I know like all these cities are connected, but the terminology.
Okay, I'm going to pull something up real quick, so bear with me.
Sure.
I think it's on this one.
You should be able to share your screen.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So hopefully this will help. Let me get back to where you are. Okay, I'm going to share the screen. And this is going to be in my book. Consistent finding of star forts on planetary alignments. And I'll just read through this. So I found all these star forts in the course of doing research for the circle alignment series that I was working on. And the basis of my research is finding the star tetrahedron in North America, which is this right here. That's what I was showing you earlier on the map. And like I said, I started up here. I found this line of cities, and then I found this line of cities. And I brought it back up here, and then I was able to find this second triangle. Got a lot of information out of this. And this is the flower of life pattern of sacred geometry.
Mm.
And do you know what the Platonic solids are?
No.
Okay. So you have like the square, the tetrahedron, which is like the triangle, dodecahedron, icosahedron, and these are all geometric shapes that are found within the star of life, or flower of life, excuse me. Okay, so this is the creation pattern of the universe. All life is based on this pattern, and it's not just on Earth, it's throughout the universe. And then within the star of life, you find this shape.
Oh, wow.
Which is the star tetrahedron.
Huh.
Okay. So it's the same shape here. I've actually got examples where I go more into depth with that. So had I not learned about sacred geometry, I wouldn't have been able to do all of this stuff. And I'm not a mathematician, but I'm pretty intuitive. So I have what I would call an intuitive understanding of this. And then basically I had extended the lines out from this original star tetrahedron, and I found linear alignments and I found circular alignments. And then I wrote all the places that connected down here. So that research is based on just going to each place on an alignment I found and doing the research there and then going on to the next place. And what I basically found is the controllers were all over these places in our history. They would go to places with starports or other important infrastructure, strategic places on the grid system. And, that seems to be how they were taking things over. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but what I believe is that the entire civilization was laid out based on this pattern, and that within this pattern you find things are connected in a linear way, and they're connected in a circular way, and they're also connected in a geometric way. So there's other relationships found within this, and it also connects back to the heavens. So the heavens are all lined up in this way. So our universe is actually geometrically based and mathematically based, among other things. And we've lost our understanding of how all that works together, again, very deliberately.
Yeah.
So that's, with what I have in front of me right now, that's the best that I can explain it, but it actually goes into more detail than that.
So if all these, reactor engines were all connected in this geometry, this flowers, what do you call it?
Flower of life. The flower of life.
The flower of life, then energy would have been easily connected. So if they were to cause a cataclysmic mud flood event, they could use that, this flower of life connection to wipe out humankind.
They did it somehow.
Yeah.
And an understanding of, if we had our understanding of how things work intact, we would understand resonance, we would understand entrainment, we would understand holograms and fractals, we would understand waves and sound, light spectrums. We'd understand the whole structure and fabric of the universe in a way that we don't, because it's all been fragmented. And I'm saying that because I think when you get right down to it, if everything is connected and we're all connected and everything in the universe is connected, there's this very close relationship that is beyond us to be able to grasp right now. We think we're separate, but we're really not separate.
Mm-hmm. So the
not
Moors
to
probably
each other, not to each other, not with other, species or other life in the
Right.
universe. We're all part of the same thing. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh no, I didn't mean to interrupt you. The Moors probably knew about this technology and were able to connect everybody in the world. And those psychopaths wanted to control it and didn't like that everybody was happy and didn't have to work as hard as they did, and they just wanted to disrupt it all. And
Very, very jealous, and I think
mhm.
very jealous of God, and I think very jealous of humanity.
Yeah.
And smart enough to be able to, they can't create, but they can reverse engineer.
Well, they
And
definitely destroyed.
so they reverse engineered the life enhancing grid system into a control system. And, they've been doing things without our knowledge. I don't know how many people follow this secret space program and the existence of that. And I really don't go much into that. I don't, other than what I've seen other people talk about, I don't know that much about it, but I do think that we've been kept in the dark about a lot of things to control us. And in so doing, I think we've been a commodity as well. And not only for physical labor, but also for DNA and other things. And that we're not the only life in the universe, that we're just part of a bigger picture.
Yeah. I mean, there's this whole exploration team that is exploring Antarctica, but they're not giving us any information of what they're discovering. It's just the same, the penguins and the ice melting, and, it's the same global agenda. Whatever they want us to know, that's what they tell us. And we can't independently explore outside of the 60th parallel. So we can't even, get together our own independent team to go down there and research Antarctica for ourselves. So we have to trust what, mainstream television tells us, So, and I don't believe anything that the government tells us, because we have the controllers and the government has their agenda. They work for the controllers, and the government uses the media to control us. And they want us to keep us very confined and very controlled in only know what they want us to know.
They want us to be fat, dumb, and happy.
Yeah. They, like the Discovery Channel, they have this like whole projection of how the Earth was, 50 million years ago, which I don't believe we've been around that long. In that everything started in Africa, and all the world's population as it is today all started from this little tribe in Africa, and that's where it all started. And we migrated all over Europe and through Canada and Russia and through all the way through to the tip of South America, which doesn't make any sense at all, and that we used to be an ice planet, which we probably could have been at one time. I don't know. I just don't believe our official narrative.
I don't believe it either. I mean, I actually tend to think at this point that our civilization is actually Afrocentric and not Eurocentric. But I do mean civilization, and not just, wandering hunter-gatherers populating the world and, all of a sudden all this happened. And, again, that's been carefully hidden from us. So those are some avenues that I'm going to be going down. I want to look at the Great Lakes of Africa.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's Rwanda, Burundi, Tanzania. And there's a lot of, in the Congo, and there's a lot of actually really bad stuff that's happened there, and a lot of hidden stuff. So like the Rwandan genocide of the 90s. And more. I mean, there's a lot of bad stuff that happened in the Congo. So I'm going to start looking into that, because I think it's part of the puzzle. And people don't think of Africa as the cradle of civilization. And I think it was. So I think it's important to go there. And And I can give as a starting point, anybody that wants to start looking into this, if you look up the Berlin Conference, which took place in 1885, and it was organized by the Chancellor of Germany, it was Otto von Bismarck. And basically, the continent of Africa was carved up by the so-called European powers in 1885. And, all this wealth was all over the place, gold and diamonds and oil and coffee and all this stuff. And so, well, we'll take this and you can have this. And, oh, by the way, King of Belgium, you can have the Congo as your own personal colony. And within a few years, the resources were taken, and the people were having their hands cut off and all kinds of stuff by these troops or whatever of the Belgian king. They were trying to keep the population under control, so they would frequently cut off one hand. All of these atrocities going on. So Africa, the story of Africa has been severely obscured. Mm-hmm. And then when you look at the Sahara now, when you look at the countries of North Central Africa where the Sahara is, on Google Earth, it looks like a giant mud flow or sand flow through there. I mean, down around Mauritania and going down to the ocean, it just looks this flow took place. And it was high civilization at one time. It was fertile and savannas and, so there's definitely a lot being covered up there. And then there's deserts around the world, I think, have the same story. I think there was something there at one time. And you start looking at what's actually in those deserts, even North America. There's things there that are really noteworthy. And so those could have been deliberately desertified or whatever you do to cause a desert.
Who knows?
I mean, if they could create a mud flood, they could do this.
Yeah.
And I talk about the Philadelphia experiment and tying it to possibly what happened. And when I first learned about the mud flood, I thought maybe it had been involved with that because I was guided to look up the year around 1743 by a friend of mine, and I found out about the Great Frost of Ireland. And I was contemplating at the idea at the time that there was a time loop that was created between 1492 and 1942. And 1942 is the year of the Philadelphia experiment. And I looked up things starting in 1717, and I found all kinds of weird stuff. So I don't think I'm off base when I say I think there's a connection there between the Philadelphia experiment and the Great Frost of Ireland. And where I've landed is I think that was what created a rip in this fabric of space-time that brought in the controllers. It brought in Mayer Rothschild. It brought in Adam Weishaupt. Because that happened 1740, 1741. This is the Great Frost of Ireland. You can look it up. Mayer Rothschild was born in 1744. Mm-hmm. Adam Weishaupt was born in 1748 in Germany. And then the progenitor of what became the House of Windsor was born in 1750 in Germany. It was called the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha originally. And I think that lineage replaced the original royal houses of Europe. So I think the ones currently that we consider to be royal were actually usurpers and just kind of came in and took things over.
Well, you know what they say.
Talked about that.
That whole phrase that truth in the movies lies in the news. So, I mean, that Philadelphia experiment and that movie, I think it was in the 80s about a ship going back in time, something like that.
The Final Countdown.
Yeah. I mean, and I didn't even know about that. I mean, I haven't been plugged into anything like that for a long time, and it showed up on my feed. And this was after I had started talking about the Philadelphia experiment. So there's actually a time traveling naval ship in the record in this movie where they come up with that idea. So I don't think it's out
of the question. I mean, it sounds crazy, but I don't think it is. I know they did something, and
like
how they did it is up for grabs. But it's in the historical record that that's when the Rothschilds and those other people started to come in around 1744, and they're definitely involved in this.
I mean, if we had the ability to time travel, it's not like they're going to come out to the open and tell us. I mean, it would be so far out of common knowledge and out of our reach that only the super rich would have ability to use it.
Yeah. And there's a researcher named Dr. David Anderson who studies time travel. And again, I think it's there in the periphery, but it's not there directly. The existence of time travel and the science of it. So, yeah, I mean, it's, like you said, they just don't want us to know about stuff like that.
Wow. So I guess they could plant their family timeline wherever they wanted to start it, Yeah.
I'm just, they did something. And I'm putting out what I've come across in my own research. And I'm not saying any of what I'm saying lightly or without basis. And while most people haven't heard of the Moors, they need to talk to the Moors themselves. They can do that.
Yeah.
They may not know it a lot of times, but the Moors will tell them that this is real information. And a lot of people don't want to let go of what they've come to believe or been told, or, the hardest part about all of this is that even in my own family, I've got a genealogy and documentation of ancestors way back, and other people do too. And a lot of people that I'm hearing from who watch my stuff say, well, we don't go back but a generation or two in my family, or my grandparents were orphans that met each other and all this stuff. So I'm hearing a lot of people that have orphans in their family history. But the hardest and toughest questions I get from people who are asking, well, what about my family genealogy? And all I can say is I know in my own family, and my mom's an avid genealogist, so I know this. Her ancestor in Florida showed up in 1830, which is the time I'm seeing was the beginning of this, to a place where there was to homestead in a place there was supposed to be like 5 cattle for every Indian or something like that, and it was filled with wild Indians.
Wow.
Well, I already know Florida is Moorish to the hilt, the architecture and everything else. I mean, it was already there.
Really?
And so that tells me, in that beginning story of when my family came to Florida, they're not telling us something. And then the rest, what I know of other ancestors, is the same thing. They would have known what was going on. And then I had a great grandfather who was a Mason. So, in my own mind, in my own family lineage, I know that they're not telling us something, but my family, my mom and her relatives and cousins, and these are the ones that really follow this kind of stuff, don't know. Why would their ancestors lie to them? Yeah. So they think it was kind of a pioneer kind of thing, and all I can say is if they can give us a false historical record for all this architecture and all these buildings and have a story for it and everything, they can do that with family records as well.
Yeah.
And I don't want to burst anybody's bubbles, because I know that's important to some people, but the reality is what we're told about our history has serious inconsistencies and flaws.
It makes me think of, you talking about Florida is the Seminole Indians, because they were one of the few tribes that never surrendered to the Americans. So it makes you wonder if they still have some history that hasn't really gotten out.
Yeah,
about the
I'm
old
sure they do.
civilization.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think the Seminole Indians were Moors, along with the other ones, and also the 12 tribes of Israel is connected to this. So you can probably Google Seminole tribe of Reuben, and you'll come up with something, because that's who they're associated with. So what I think is that, when people ask, well, what do the Native Americans say? What do they have to say about it? There's been so much trauma and so much genocide of the Native people that I would not be surprised if there were secret societies within these tribes that kept this knowledge, wisdom keepers, but that people in general don't necessarily know about it. Because if people were being targeted and killed, and not just in North America, but all over the world, because of their identity and their tribal identity, it would be a way of keeping other people safe. So they wouldn't necessarily know about this higher timeline and higher history. Because I believe the indigenous people of every continent built this infrastructure. And that includes here, and that includes in Australia, the Aborigines, who are also said to be tribe of Reuben. I think they built it all. And the history we're taught is like, well, that's not even possible. And that's what people believe. But I think the builders of civilization were kicked back to the Stone Age for the most part when this took place. And the controllers just took over everything. The identity, credit, and we're taught that all these folks were hunter-gatherers and primitive.
Yeah, they teach social studies.
That.
They don't teach real history. And history began in the Americas, and nothing seems to go beyond that except for how we migrated. So it's amazing what they teach in high schools and our school system right now. And then if you want to know anything, you have to go to college, and then it's so divided. There's so many different subjects that you almost never know anything about world history as a whole. You would have to, get a degree in it to understand everything, and you still don't get everything.
Right.
Yeah. And
they've expended an inordinate amount of energy in creating these false narratives.
Yeah.
Every book, everything that's written down on paper, every eyewitness account of the Civil War and all this stuff, just this enormous energy into creating this whole new history, so that you can reference it and you can teach people, well, this is what it was like back in the 1800s or whenever. And if you start trying to trace the history of railroads, it will make your head spin. Absolutely make your head spin, because the railroads were connected with the electric companies that were connected with the streetcar companies, and there were these mergers and sale-offs and buy-offs, and and then by, let's say, the 1930s, well, this isn't feasible anymore, so we're just going to stop. But I mean, that's kind of how the stories go. Incredibly detailed information about these companies. And I was trying to skim through. I've done some research on them, and I just basically had to skim off the top and just pull out the relevant parts to what I was trying to say, because to go into too much detail on it is just too much.
Yeah.
So they've really gone to a lot of trouble to make this real. And I think the reason that they've gone to that trouble is because this is a free will playing planet. So we have to agree to what's taking place here. And if we don't know the truth and all we're taught is lies, then we agree to it because we think there's merit in the lies. We think the lies are truth, whether it's about the history, whether it's about our neighbor or other countries. And and we're taught to distrust or be suspicious of that person because of their skin color, or that country because of their political system or economic system. Therefore, we're going to go to fight them because they're different from us. That's what we've been told.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's all we know. And, you just really have to be ready and open-minded to start looking at things differently. And I really recommend that, for those that have reached a certain level of awareness and feel comfortable with this information, I don't recommend trying to tell everybody because they're not ready for it.
No, it's too much information all at once. I mean, if anybody's, thinks they're conservative and thinks they're awake, and then you watch this video and you think that it's almost too much information all in one video. So you have to start, like I started with the mud floods, and that kind of like morphed into other information, and like, oh my God, this goes even further, and it's so deep. The rabbit hole is so deep, and the cover up is so deep, and the history, and then you discover like all of history is a lie, and it's like, well, what's true? And almost nothing is true. Everything's been just propagandized, and just through publicity and through just education, mind control. I mean, all of it is just utter garbage. And it, when I did all this like flat earth research, my brain was in like a fog because it was too much information all at once. And for 3 months, I just felt like I couldn't think straight because there's so much information. And then I came across the world fairs, and that information blew my mind. My wife and I were just watching these like videos by Hattie McCoskey, and I'm like, oh my God. And then it just got deeper and deeper. And then I found your stuff, and I'm like, oh my God, it's so crazy. So it'll just engulf you, and it'll keep you busy for a good year.
Yeah, I've been doing this for 3 years, and on the average, I would say once a week, I've got something out. New research takes longer, and sometimes I can piece something together from previous research that I've done. But I've got over 200 videos, and somewhere around there. And I blog, so I have about the same number of blog posts.
And then you have a Patreon with even more stuff.
The Patreon, I have some exclusive content on that. And I'm an educator now on a platform called Unguru Your Life, which is brand new. And the official kickoff should be hopefully in the next couple of weeks for that. So I've been doing some exclusive content where I go more into depth for people that are paying, essentially. But I still put out a lot of information on YouTube. I'm not going to stop.
Yeah.
It's not just any information. So I kind of walk a balance now, but it's like, it's something I feel needs to get out to people. So it's pretty much the work I do now.
You played a video with your interview with Dr. G, and you kind of go in more about the Moorish paradigm, because she was very interested in that topic specifically. And that little half-hour video was pretty amazing, and you put out a lot of information in that one video, which is the video that you are supposed to show at the Unguru conference, right?
Well, it's the video that I showed at the Human Origins conference in March.
That's right.
It's the same video. And do you have it? Because I can send you a link for it.
I don't have the actual video. I just have.
I'll send you the link for it.
Okay.
And it's basically a synopsis of what I think happened to the Moorish civilization and how it got taken over, and why. The evidence for all of these places that are in alignment with the moon and the sun, and that's not random.
Yeah,
they're in alignment with each other. It's like everything was laid out in a very precise way in accordance with lunar cycles and solar cycles and solstices and equinoxes and full moons and star systems. So you have a lot of alignments with the Pleiades and the Orion's belt.
If you can read the stars, you can you know exactly what time of year it is, what time of day, just
from the infrastructure.
right.
So that is most known with the megalithic structures that you find all over the world, that are aligned with equinoxes and solstices, for example. But what I'm finding and what I believe from my research is that existed up until modern times. So that modern, the Empire State Building, state capitals, the Washington Monument, and you can start looking this up, lighthouses, they have these same alignments. And I don't think that's by chance. And I think it was built by the same civilization and not by the Freemasons or the ones that came in and took credit for it.
Very interesting.
I think they worship the Moors at the same time they denigrate the Moors.
So they stole their identity as their own.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah. I believe that.
They did. And understanding that is crucial to understanding what's taken place here.
Wow.
That let's just talk about the Freemasons. It's other groups as well. But that's essentially what they did. And that everything revolves around the original Masons and what they accomplished, and the Freemasons and what they stole and took credit for. Everything. Because they were the ones that were directly involved in the cover-up.
Wow.
But the Jesuits were involved in it. The royal families were involved in it. Banks were involved in it. They would have to
be, because they're still in power today.
Yeah.
So whoever's at the top echelon of power, I mean, they're all involved.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Certain families, particularly, but it's for their benefit and not ours. And the force that's behind this is anti-life. So, I mean, this is a Leviathan that will crush even its supporters.
Yeah.
So they'll eat their own.
Yeah.
While they're crushing everything else, they'll crush their own.
I mean, if you've watched any kind of like royalty like shows, I mean, they were producing kids left and right with their bath produce. I mean, whoever was bathing them were having their kids, and they were having dozens and dozens of kids throughout their lives. And so they don't have any respect of, even though they produced those kids, they didn't care about them. They only cared about what was going to continue the lineage. They didn't care about their slaves, even though they were part of their blood. So
it's really complicated, but and it's hard to believe because humans don't want to believe this kind of thing to be true. But
people want to live in a fantasy.
It takes a real shift in perception to really be able to understand that. And I think the good thing about being a YouTube creator in the world we live in today is there's so much going on right now that just backs this up.
Mm-hmm.
At least amongst the awake population.
At least
the
for
sleep
now.
population, not so much, but the awake population, there's examples to show you that so many things aren't right.
Yeah.
With what's going on.
I mean, it's no accident that all these like prolific writers all popped up around the same time of like 1888, 1890, and they were reshaping our world for the future. I mean, that's why when we're in middle school and high school, we're reading those same books. It's to paint a picture of that time. They don't want us looking back beyond that.
And they want us to see this terrible future. So you have Charles Dickens, Mark Twain, Jack London, John Steinbeck, George Orwell, in 1984, Aldous Huxley and Brave New World. Jack London was a socialist, and we're forced to read books like Call of the Wild in school. And then they make movies, multiple movies of these books. Call of the Wild has nothing uplifting in it.
No.
Nothing.
It's just
And yet
savagery.
we're forced to read these books. Why can't they have us read something that's going to fill our soul with goodness and light instead of a dog that is kidnapped from his happy home and sold into a life of servitude as a sled dog in Alaska, so mistreated that he ends up leaving and just going into the wild? Why are we made to read that in junior high?
It's just so we look at our past as that we were savages and we're a bunch of racists and and it's setting up the world for this one world government.
They're going to save us. They're going to bring us to destruction, and then they're going to ride in on their black horse, and we've got an answer to this, but the answer isn't good
to racism.
The answer isn't good
poverty.
for humanity.
No.
Yep. And like I said, and I'll repeat it, I don't think they're going to get away with it. I think something's going to happen. I don't think they're going to get away with it. Everything they've done is just totally against the laws of nature and goodness and universe, and crimes against humanity are incalculable. And I just don't think they're going to get away with it.
Yeah. Well,
and I sincerely hope I'm right.
Yeah. All we can do is just keep spreading the word and
spreading the word.
Keep doing these type of interviews and just, hopefully we'll get to keep expanding our audiences and not always talking to the same people over and over. That's why my mind's always been open. Like I used to think that I was awake, by listening to Michael Savage and Ben Shapiro and Alex Jones, but it took me a long time to realize that they're just controlled opposition and that they're allowed to do and say what they say because they're under control, Otherwise, people like us, they would shut us off immediately because we're talking too much truth.
Well, I'll let them keep us on as long as they want.
Yeah.
But it's and again, thank goodness there's a lot of people that are doing their own thing and coming together. I've heard them called citizen journalists or whatever. It's super important, and just start looking in your own communities with different eyes.
Yeah.
And I can guarantee you'll find things, whether it's your parks or your rivers or your schools or your libraries or your courthouses, especially the older buildings in your community.
I mean, it was just amazing in that little town of Rockwall. I mean, there's I don't even think there's 5,000 people there. And yet there is a whole history that's just hidden there,
Josh Reeves, YouTube.
I wrote his name down.
I think I saw some of his work first back around 2013, 2014. Okay. And that was really probably around the last time that I saw it, but it's got plenty of information in there. So check it out.
Yeah, it's amazing. When we were driving back from Cleveland, my wife and I were just looking at all these structures and we're like, oh, that looks like one of those energy buildings, because the churches, they had these resonating windows. And now they have the glass window to prevent the organs from projecting the sounds that were healing for all the people. And that's one of the theories that, the music would heal people, or they would make people feel however they wanted them to feel. And it was always a positive thing.
I believe that. I absolutely believe that.
And to cover up that history, I mean, they took out the organs and they closed off those resonators. And so now we don't, we can't feel good, And
then they replace it with frequencies that aren't good for us.
Right.
That cause anxiety and anger and things like that.
I mean, we're all listening to music with the 440 hertz, which is a chaos frequency. when really we should be listening to music with the 432 hertz, which is healing and calming and soothing. And, I was telling my wife, you should tune your guitar into 432.
Mhm. And I know there's a lot of musicians that are doing that, and a lot of relaxing kind of videos that you can find on YouTube in the solfeggio frequencies, which are healing.
That's it. Solfeggio. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
So lots of stuff to find out. I know my to-do list grows all the time. So my challenge is finding the time to get it all done.
Yeah.
But I will.
So you're putting out a book, right? When is that?
So basically, I've got a publisher, and I'm putting my blog together in different ways. So I've got a book on the physical evidence for the planetary grid system and the suppressed global civilization that I'm working on. The final edits for the editor, and hopefully it will be out as an ebook in the next couple of weeks,
Cool.
where all that information will be all together in one place. And then I'm going to do the same thing for other work I've already done.
You're probably going to have to do a series of books.
It's going to be a series.
Yeah.
For sure.
Because that's a lot of information. Because sometimes your videos are just all over the place, and then you have videos responding to comments. And that's a whole other thing, because people from all over the world, I mean, they make comments to you in your videos about what they discover in their local city, which is like a cool thing. I love watching those, because it's not just your perspective, but it's, people are engaging with you, which is cool.
I've had some real breakthroughs from doing that, because my work is based on the alignments that I found, but when people bring in other places I wouldn't be looking at otherwise, I'm finding other things. So it's a collaborative process, and it's exciting. And I definitely feel like I have help from the other side, and that I'm just a well-informed vessel, and I'm just trying to get this out as quickly as I can. So it's, when I say that, it's like it's not me per se, but that there are positive forces that want this information back into our awareness. And again, I know there's other people that are, I'm sure, being used in the same way. They're just getting that information out there.
Well, I'm sure, spreading this information, it's creating a lot of positive energy. So you're getting a lot of good vibrations from all your watchers. I mean, anyone who disagrees with you is not going to stay on your channel very long. They're just going to be like, "Oh, this is crap," and then they'll be gone. Which is what we hope.
But I wouldn't be putting it out there if I didn't have good reason to believe it. And it's certainly something that at the very least is thought provoking. And that's the way that I try to put it together, is kind of show you what I found, or how I got to why I believe something. And that usually involves a comparison of some kind. This is in China and this is in Oklahoma, sort of thing. And let the viewer, as much as possible, either draw your own conclusions or do your own research, because it is thought-provoking at the very least. And that's how I even got into this. It's like, wait a minute, this, how, what? And I needed a way to show people what I was seeing. And I'm a good writer, so it was kind of a natural fit for me to start blogging. And from there, it was natural to start making videos. Yeah,
because there's physical evidence that proves your theories. It's not, it's like, like time travel. I mean, that's all speculation. There's that possibility. No, even though it's a strong coincidence.
But I can show you the same style of architecture in Guthrie, Oklahoma, that I found in Invercargill, New Zealand, which is at the tip of New Zealand. It looks like the same building. Looks like exactly the same building. And I found the same type of architecture in Siberia. So there's like one hand of design that's running through this. And, they can hide it by not putting it in the written record. but it's much harder to hide in the physical record.
Yeah.
And that includes giant bones and things like that. And that's a whole nother topic. About the Smithsonian coming in and swooping up all these bones that used to be in museums or on display somewhere. Oh, can't have that. So they get whisked away, and speculation they're under the Smithsonian in the basement, or were shipped out to the middle of the ocean and shoved overboard. But that's part of the story as well. We were much bigger.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of stories about the Smithsonian just hiding all this information and archaeological records, and we'll never see it out in the public because they don't want us to find it. It's just like the Vatican. I mean, they have tons of data and history that we will never see because they don't want us discovering what is in our past.
But fortunately, that's the beauty of the internet, because there's things on the internet that they never wanted us to see either. And I know I wouldn't be able to do the research. I've been to a lot of the places and I've taken my own pictures, but there's a lot of places I haven't ever been to. So I have to rely on that. The research I'm doing right now on the 1990s, interesting to find out that the World Wide Web was created by someone who worked for CERN over in Switzerland. The internet was coming out about that time. He developed the World Wide Web. His name is Tim Berners-Lee. He's still alive. He developed the World Wide Web. The first website was a CERN website. I really don't think that the internet was created for us to wake each other up, but that's what happened.
So it's supposed to be like an interweb for the government only?
I think it was supposed to be a control mechanism. And I think they lost control of it.
Yeah.
Because what I'm seeing is, all the stuff I'm seeing is that it was created by the controllers.
I mean, they could have just left everything as it was and just, we were very mind controlled because we only had television, we only had radio, we only had newspapers. So we thought we were being told the truth. But, all those outlets were, that was like the pinnacle of mind control, really. And then movies to make us fantasize about what could be. And I mean, they would reveal everything in movies. We just didn't know it.
Right. And we go to movies and what do we eat? We eat junk food.
Yeah. Yeah. The lower our immune system.
Which is literally junk.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of pieces to it. But thankfully we're living at an exciting time, albeit scary, but still very exciting. And, the faster we can spread the awakening, they can't stay hidden and they can't keep their dark activities out of sight anymore. And that's what's happening.
Yeah, I'm definitely living on the edge of my seat. I mean, I have, a bug out bag and we have our weapons and we have our heirloom seeds that we're, and we're just ready to go at any moment given. Just, but if
I have a car. It's kind of been turned into a camper, sort of. It's a SUV. Mm-hmm. I have supplies in there. But I got that ready to go a couple of years ago. And again, my optimism has been increasing, and I don't want to have to ever go that route.
Oh, I don't either.
But I also don't ever want to have to end up in a re-education camp or donating my organs without my consent.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's kind of what some of the activities the controllers have going on in other countries. But again, I'm very optimistic that things have changed and we're not going to be going in that direction.
I hope not.
But I'm an options person, so I like to keep my options open. But I really, and the deeper I get into this research and the more that I see, it's like they're not going to get away with this.
Yeah.
So I think there are good people that have been planning for a long time to figure out a way to stop them. Mm-hmm. And I think we're I think we're at the tail end of those plans. So if I'm right, we should see something relatively soon, or sooner rather than later, to stop the criminals, because that's what they are.
I'll go with that optimism. You know, I like to stay optimistic. I don't want to be all doom and gloom and just,
Yeah.
you know, ready to give up. I mean, that's the, yeah, it's not an option.
And I don't know if what you see from your community, but I know what I see from my community is people are waking up.
Yeah.
A lot of people are waking
I mean,
up.
more and more people that I talk to, or they're just really open to the idea. They just don't know the information's out there, you know, but they're getting clues. Little by little, they're getting clues, and all the stuff that's happening in the news right now, it's all very suspicious, and everybody's catching on. It's like, well, why are they pushing this so hard? I mean, if this was really deadly, then everybody would just be dropping like flies all around us at all times if it was that deadly, you know? So there is a lot of mind control, and there's a lot of manipulation, and, you know, the fact that every commercial has something to do with the, you know, the scene. I can't even say the word.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, we're definitely critical.
Yeah.
You know, anybody that's trying to get the truth out there in a genuine way is really critical to helping other people, and everything that you do has significance. So don't not do something because you don't think it's going to help. And I'm not addressing that to you, Mikey. I'm just kind of saying that in general. Just do what you're motivated to do, and don't not do something because you don't think it's going to make a difference.
Yeah. And that's what I've been doing. I've been trusting my gut. And, you know, at first I was really afraid to talk to people and talk about things that are kind of like anti-mainstream, you know, because I worked in entertainment for a good 10 years, and everybody seems to just go with the flow and just believe what they're told. And, you know, there's a lot of easy manipulation. And so I felt like I had to keep my mouth shut and not say certain things. So all this stuff that I had always researched and understood, I just kept to myself, you know, because I was surrounded by people who would just, you know, unfriend me or not talk to me anymore. And I just got to a point where I just didn't really care, you know. They weren't really my friends if I couldn't really be honest with them, you know.
Mm-hmm. And in, you know, in a similar way, not exactly the same, but when I first started blogging and making videos, I was nervous. You know, I knew what I had to put out there was different. And if it had been really negative, I probably would have stopped a long time ago.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I could have handled it if I was being constantly attacked. But that's not what's happened.
No.
That's not what's happened at all. And, you know, as I said earlier, I mean, I'll keep doing this as long as I can, and move to other platforms when I have to, but I don't have to. So,
because a lot of people are beginning to sense that there is something wrong, or they've always sensed that there's something wrong, and they just didn't know how to find that information or seek it out. You know, I was that way. I always felt there was something wrong with this world that we lived in, and we were being lied to. I just didn't know what it was. I would look at things and think, that's really weird. You know, how did this get built when, you know, we barely had trains. You know?
Well, I can tell you, between 2018 and 2020, I started in June of 2018, and by June-ish of 2020, I had 6,000 subscribers on YouTube. Between last year and now, I have grown to 30. I'm almost at 33,000.
Yeah.
And that's a year.
That's incredible.
A year. And my blog hasn't grown as much. Like, I have like 250 followers on my blog, but I have a lot more visitors than that. And I would say in the last year and a half, I get well over 100 views a day from all over the world. And that's without any marketing or anything like that. That's just organic.
That's just
With
your
people-
blog.
with people finding me. So even though I don't have comparatively many followers on my blog, I have a lot of views. And, again, for somebody that's not known, I'm not an author, I'm not a speaker or anything like that, to have that kind of viewership, literally from all over the world.
Yeah.
And I'm saying at least 100 views. So 200, 300, 400 is not uncommon of people that are just finding it.
Yeah.
So it's definitely working its way out there.
Yeah, and I'm slowly starting to get some traction. Like, I just felt like, interviewing music artists, there was no like interaction. There was no real interest in, unless it's someone that they already currently know, and I just felt like, there's no engagement. There's no one commenting. There's no interaction at all. So I might as well talk about something that I actually enjoy if I'm going to get no reaction or no enjoyment. Yeah.
And we just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
There's a lot more. A lot more.
Well, Michelle, I this was such an honor to have you on the show. I was surprised that you contacted me back so quickly. It was like within like not even an hour. So I just figured because you had so many subscribers and you've done so much content that you wouldn't, would have taken a week to get back to me. Yeah. But I really appreciate you coming on the show, and I hopefully, people watching are learning something and they subscribe to your channel and to your blog and your Patreon.
Well, thank you again, Mikey. And, just let me know if you ever want to have me back on again, or a particular area that I'll concentrate on.
Yeah, maybe we'll have you back on once you do your book release, and then we'll talk about that. Yeah.
Okay, that would be cool.
Yeah. All right, Michelle. Well, you enjoy your weekend and have a great year, and hopefully I'll see you at the Unguru. I'll try to make it out there because the next conference is.
It's Human Origins. Unguru is online. It's unguruyourlife.com, and I have a page there and some classes that I offer in sacred geometry, and also course exclusive content. And then there's a whole bunch of other things on the site for people that subscribe. And then I was a speaker at the Human Origins Conference, which was online this past year, and I'm also going to be a speaker next year, and it's going to be in Albuquerque in May.
Cool.
2022 Human Origins Conference. So that's coming together now.
That's in May,
and,
right?
That's in May.
Yeah.
And great speakers. Linda Moulton Howe is going to be one of the speakers. But a number of other people that are really good. So it's exciting. Yeah. And, little by little things are happening, and it's just never ending.
Yeah.
But it's also a joy to be able to do this work.
Yeah, we probably should get what's his face from Bushwhacking Tartaria to come out there with you.
Yeah, for Dustin. Yeah, he does great.
And
great
then,
work, great guy.
David Weiss, he might be a good candidate to be a part of that.
Yeah. So the community's growing, and a lot of good people involved with it. And I really appreciate the work that you do, Mikey.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot. Yeah.
So we'll talk again soon.
All right. We'll see you around. I'll put the all your links in the description. That way people can find you, and then I'll send you the link to the video once it goes out.
Okay. Sounds great.
All right. You take care.
Thanks a lot. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of KGUP Presents. Be sure to follow Michelle Gibson on Piercing the Veil of Illusion by clicking the links in the description. And if you haven't already done so, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode of this show. And if you love this show, you can support us by purchasing a t-shirt, hat, or even a sling bag. Just go to KGUP1065.com/shop. The links are also in the description, and for a limited time, these t-shirts are at a special price for only $13. These shirts are sorry. These shirts are high quality, so they look cool, and you're supporting a great cause, and they're intentionally priced so low it's impossible to break your bank, so there's no excuses not to get one. And be sure to tune in tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, because we have another special guest. We have the legendary Karen B of Strange World unveiling this realm, Bitches Brew, and as seen at Flattoberfest and Solar Returns. And best of all, we are broadcasting live for the very first time. Oh my God, I'm like so nervous. And if everything goes as planned, we will take some calls from you guys, and you can ask Karen B a question yourself. So thanks again for watching KGUP Presents. Until next time, this is Mikey J. I'm out.